This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.
Hey, this is Rachel from Craft Beer and Brewing. This episode is brought to you by our Brewers Retreat. Tickets are on sale now for the ultimate brewing experience this September in Booth Bay Harbor, Maine. Don't miss the chance to brew with some of the world's best brewers like Dan Kleban of Maine Beer, Jason Perkins of Allagash, Phil Wymore of Perennial, Will Myers of Cambridge Brewing, Neil Fisher of Weldworks, and more. Enjoy fabulous food, fantastic beer, and one-of-a-kind brewing experience at an oceanfront luxury resort. Tickets are selling fast. Visit brewersretreat.com or give me a call at 888-875-8708, extension 0, to secure your spot now.
Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm your host, co-founder and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogner. My guest on the show today is Dan Kleban of Maine Beer Company in Freeport, Maine. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks for having me, Jamie.
Dan got his start making beer professionally on 45-gallon pots on lobster burners as on a very small glorified homebrew scale, Blickman pots, I think you mentioned.
They absolutely were.
And has gone from that kind of small scale, incredibly artisanal hands-on production to now being next in line to chair the BA Board of Directors leading America's Brewers. Dan, how did this happen? You left a promising career as an attorney, and you started homebrewing and decided to turn that into a vocation in the late 2000s. Why take that kind of risk and jump right into this career of brewing?
That's a great question, and I'm going to try to not be too long-winded with my answer. But there certainly is a bit of a backstory here. I graduated law school in 2007. And went to school in Boston, and my wife and I moved back up to Maine, where I started practicing as an attorney. And it wasn't too long after starting that a partner at the law firm where I was working introduced me to craft beer in the United States, and kind of, I guess, what I would call craft beer in general. That is, the artisanal beers that were being made in Belgium and in Germany. That was really my first intro to this whole world. So That really wasn't that long ago. And through that relationship, he happened to be a homebrewer as well. He had been, homebrewing since, back in the probably late 70s, early 80s. And he asked me one day when I was over there, over at his house, sharing some beers. He's like, do you want to come be my brewery assistant for the day? And I think what I soon found out that meant is, do I want to help him clean for the day?
Sure.
So I did clean his equipment for him while he showed me how to homebrew.
Yeah.
And again, at that point, I was a practicing attorney, had no ambition to become a professional brewer. Never thought I would become a professional brewer. There were not breweries opening up in the United States,
right?
Anywhere near the rate that they've been opening up over the last 6 or 7 years. But in 2008 and 2009, there were some kind of macro things going on in our economy. There's a big financial collapse. And I was not immune to that. So I actually got laid off as an attorney in the winter of 2009, which actually turned out to be a really, really good thing for me.
Yeah.
It was certainly one of those times in my life where, you can make the best of a bad situation. And it just so happened that prior to that, my brother had approached me with the idea, because he would help me homebrew on the weekends.
Yeah.
And he knew that I loved it, had a true passion for it. He approached me with the idea of starting a brewery. So, I was still practicing at that point, and I'm like, oh man, there's no way I can, with a straight face, go home to my wife and say, look, I know that I just borrowed $150,000 to put myself through law school, and you helped with health insurance, and she's a nurse and she worked all through while I was in law school. I couldn't go home and say, like, I'm going to quit this all and open a brewery. But it turns out getting laid off is a built-in excuse to go home to her and say, look, maybe this law thing isn't working out as I planned. And frankly, I didn't like practicing law. And so it was certainly was a point in my life that it was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
And so it was in 2009, my brother and I had early 2009, put a business plan together, and seeing kind of what was going on in the world around us. He came from the world of finance. Obviously, I came from the world of big, large corporate law firm. We saw kind of what kind of corporate America's attitude, where it had landed us.
Yeah.
And both of us were pretty disgusted by it. And said we decided that I love to make beer, but to us, Maine Beer Company was going to be more than about making beer. If I just wanted to make beer, I would have stayed a home brewer.
Yeah.
We wanted to try to prove a point that companies, even as small as we started and as small as we still are, can be a true model for good in the world and really have a positive impact. And really felt that the fate of our community depended on it. I mean, because if corporations just kept acting like they were, like we're going to end up in situations like we ended up in 2009.
Right.
So there was a bigger, I think, motivation for us to start a brewery than just to make beer.
Right.
It was that larger, I think, social mission that we wanted to test out.
How does that play out for that brewery? There are plenty of companies who use that kind of moral approach to sustainability, and they love to advertise that because it looks like good marketing. It can be a lot harder to put that into real practice that has an effect on the people around you and the community around you. For you all, what does that implementation of those principles look like for the brewery?
People can smell out bullshit, right?
Yeah.
They can. You know when a company's sincere in their message or not. Are they using it as a marketing ploy, or is this really a core value? Or is what they're talking about really something that's a core value of theirs? And so, going back to the beginning, before we made any beer and we were just drafting a business plan, we knew that we wanted this to be the single driving value of our company. And we gave a lot of thought to how can we embed this in our company, in our culture. And so one of the things we did, early on, before, again, we were just drafting a business plan, before we even sold a bottle of beer, is I actually came across an organization while I was just, I think, trolling craft beer websites just to learn about the industry. And I remember sifting through New Belgium's website one day and just looking at their beers, not really looking for anything in particular, but I clicked on a tab that took me to their probably social responsibility page or what they were doing. And obviously they're very active and engaged. But I came across this organization that they were a member of called 1% for the Planet. And so I did some more research on this organization and took this to my brother. And I said, look, you got to check out this organization. It's really cool. And he's like, well, what is it? And I said, it's an organization that's founded by the founder of Patagonia Outerwear, Yvon Chouinard. And he started this organization with the idea that if every company in the world donated 1% of their revenue, not profits, mind you, so top line revenue, to environmentally focused nonprofits, we could save the world. I mean, that's it in a nutshell, right? So if everybody just gives a little bit, we can have a huge impact. And so what you do, if you want to participate in the program, in the organization, is you as a business pledge that 1% top line revenue to environmentally focused nonprofits that are certified by 1% for the Planet to be recipients. So they're not sham organizations. They do their due diligence and make sure they're legit operations. So we decided to join. Again, we hadn't sold a bottle of beer. We weren't making any money at the time, but we said, look, this is a way for us to, keep ourselves honest, and also show the world that we're, literally putting our money where our mouth is.
Right.
This is something we truly believe in, and we're going to start donating money to nonprofits even during the lean years. The first and second year, we weren't making any profit.
Wow.
But we were donating revenue. So we weren't even paying. We were not even paying ourselves, and we were giving money away.
Huh.
So that
Sure.
That's one, I think, way that we were able to keep ourselves honest and true to our mission, and also to show others.
Now, was that motivated out of just love for the planet, or is that motivated out of a way to connect with consumers, or some combination of both?
Both.
Okay.
Certainly both. It certainly is derived out of a belief.
Yeah.
That, and I believe it firmly, and even more so today than I did back then, that organizations, corporations, or any organization, we tend to get away with externalizing a lot of costs, and
right.
certainly one of the biggest externalities that companies create are effects on our environment.
Yeah.
And what I mean by an externality is these are things that we do to harm things that somebody else has to pay for, or somebody else has to live with.
Right.
We're externalizing that cost. And so I truly believe, deep down to my core, that that's not right.
Yeah.
That's a free ride that companies are taking on the backs of their communities. And so for that reason, that is why environmentally focused nonprofits are so important to us. That's not to say that
Sure.
Obviously, every nonprofat, at least that I know of, is deserving of every dollar that they get. Right.
Right.
Socially focused nonprofit.
And breweries have a rather large footprint on the environment.
Yes.
From the agriculture that produces ingredients, to the manufacturing process and wastewater, to shipping and distribution, and carbon that's produced, the fuel and energy that's takes in that production process. How do you live out those values in a lot of these areas?
Yeah, I mean,
as a production and a business that makes things and creates waste.
That's exactly. No, you couldn't be more correct about that. We certainly are in this a resource intensive industry. We use, like you said, we use a lot of water. We produce CO2.
Right.
We use a lot of electricity. Especially the bigger you get and the bigger
right.
your pump motors are and everything, the more energy you're consuming. So I think it's especially important for manufacturing facilities like breweries to be
right.
especially conscious of these things. And I would preface all this with, I always tell people is you do what you can do. Not everybody has the same means, right? Certainly, Sierra Nevada in New Belgium and the larger breweries can do a lot more and have done a lot more,
Sure,
and that's
sure.
all the credit to them in the world for doing what they do.
Yep.
But as we started out brewing 45 gallons of beer at a time. We don't have solar panel over a carport, and we don't have CO2. We can't capture the CO2 and reuse it.
Right.
That's just not reality, right? So my advice is always, and what we kind of the rule we live by is you do what you can do.
Yeah.
And I think and this really goes back to the earlier question you asked, is how do you embed this philosophy in your culture?
Right.
And I think as long as you're constantly reminding yourself of why you're doing what you do, and for us, it's because we want to have this positive impact on our communities, you will make business decisions that are consistent with that purpose, right? And so, for example, it was, I think, almost 3 years ago, we were contemplating, we had some capacity, or we had we had the ability, if we wanted, to add capacity. We were selling all the beer we could make, and we could have bought some more fermenters and easily sold that beer too, and,
Sure.
and made more money. That wouldn't have been a problem. But we also knew that our mission was to, again, minimize our environmental impact. And so instead of investing in more fermenters, we we invested in a $250,000 solar panel project before we invested in capacity.
Wow.
And again, it was the reason was twofold. It was to keep ourselves honest. This is why we exist. We don't exist just to make beer and make as much of it as fast as we can. That's not why we're here. So we did that project, and again, it was also to show the people that buy into our belief system, to show them that, look, we haven't abandoned you. We're still we're still staying true to who we are. And at the time, that's what we could do. We were able to do that, and we did. But a funny thing, it's not funny, but I think to some people it might sound surprising, because I think the typical, business ethos is, it's profit driven, right? You just try to maximize profit, shareholder profit.
If you can grow, you should.
If you can grow, you should. And then, if you can happen to then give back, if you're fortunate enough to make enough money that you can then give back to charity, well, then you should do that. We flipped that on its head. We said, if you lead with your values, if you lead with giving back, commitment to the planet, your community, and your employees, that's going to drive profit. That is going to resonate with the beer drinkers. That's what's going to distinguish you in a crowded marketplace. Values. It's why you're making what you make, not just what you make. Tons of people out there are making great beer.
Yeah.
And
I think you have to step back and say, you're talking about people aren't necessarily going to buy beer that's not as good or as high a quality, if just for the values alone.
That's correct.
But when you are on a fairly even playing field with other fellow breweries producing similar quality of beer, then those values come into play.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the way that I think if more companies, and this isn't just applied to brewers, if they took this approach of leading with your values.
Yeah.
We've shown, and other companies, we're certainly not the only one in the world that has done this, that in and of itself can drive, in what should drive your growth and your profit. And it creates a more lasting and durable relationship between you, the brewer, the manufacturer, and your customer. It's not just transactional with the people that are drinking our beer. They're drinking our beer in part because they enjoy it, right? You can't, if it was shitty beer, I don't care what your values are.
Right.
No one's going to buy it. But you connect with them on a much deeper level, which creates a relationship, like I said, that's much more durable and will be long term. Will be much longer lasting.
I don't know if we talk about this that much, but I think that there, the concept and the psychology of taste itself is a malleable thing. We like to think that an idea of good is based solely on what's in a glass, but as we've talked about before, a lot of what you view as good is also based on the context, the surroundings, the experience, who you're drinking that beer with, where you're drinking it. And in some ways, I wouldn't be surprised if entering into that sip from that glass, knowing where that company is coming from, that those values may actually impact the way that beer tastes, in the mind of the person drinking it.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that. That we're not robots. We're human beings, and we experience things on many different levels. In I would say that just the truly kind of objective flavor of the beer, or the objective functionality of the coat you're wearing or the shoes you're wearing, is of relatively. It's important, but I think there are things that are more important. And that is that kind of unquantifiable quality to the products that we buy, that we drink, that we eat, that we put on our bodies, that resonates with people on a much deeper level. I mean, I can go from good beer to good beer. If I don't have an allegiance, though, to a brewery for some reason, other than they make good beer, I'm just going to keep going to different breweries, right? What keeps me going back time and again to the same thing? It's more than just what I'm drinking, or again what I'm wearing or eating. It's that my values align with. I want to support somebody whose values align with mine.
Right.
And I think that's a very common human trait.
Yeah.
We don't want to support things that we don't believe in. We want to support things that we do believe in.
Yeah.
And that has very little to do with the objective quality of the product.
Right. Another piece I find fascinating that you touched on a little bit there is this idea of growth, and the idea of growth not necessarily being good for growth's sake. For most breweries now, I mean, we are seeing the negative effects of growth that was not well considered. We're seeing some breweries who have taken out debt in order to seize opportunities that they thought they saw in the market. We're seeing those chickens come home to roost, and owners and founders losing control of their breweries, handing them over to the banks to loan them money, and we're seeing that growth in and of itself is not necessarily a good thing. It can be a very dangerous thing and a thing that puts people's businesses in jeopardy. At the same time, if you are a values-driven business like yours and you want to give back to your employees and also be able to invest in 1% for the planet, you have to make some money. You have to be profitable, and you have to in order to afford those kinds of things, and you need to continue to grow at a certain scale because it provides larger dollar amounts to make those contributions more significant and not just a percentage of a very small revenue number. How do you balance that question, and how do you know when it's the right time to take that growth step?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think that's probably a question that is top of mind for a lot of brewers, especially this day and age.
Yeah.
For all the reasons that you prefaced your question with, and our approach from the beginning, I guess, it's been grounded in kind of several principles. That were really never written down, but these are just things I think are just my brother and I's approach to our business in general. And one of those is it's methodical growth. Never get out too far over the tip of your skis, right? And grow for the right reasons. Are you growing just so you can make more money and buy a nicer car and buy a boat or buy a bigger house? If that's the only reason, then that is not, in my mind, a legitimate reason for growth.
Yeah.
Are you making growth decisions based off of the fact that you want to provide better benefits for your employees? You want to provide your employees growth opportunities, for them to advance their own careers? Are you growing because you want to invest more in sustainability offsets? Are you growing because you want to give more back to your community? Those are legitimate reasons for growth. You're exactly right. You need to grow if you want to do those things. You need to make more money to afford to do those things. And so that has always kind of been our approach, is we have to ask ourselves that. But there's also, it's not all just kind of altruistic like that. There are business realities to things, right?
Sure.
If we go out of business, we're not employing anyone. We're not donating 1% of anything to anybody. So there are market realities that can drive growth. And I remember, our first business plan, I think, had us making, maybe in 5 years we were making like 3,000 barrels.
Yeah.
And we thought if we could ever get there, like, wow, we're going to stop. We'll have it. I will have replaced my lawyer salary. We'll have health insurance. We'll employ, I think, maybe 3 or 4 people. Like, that is, boom, we're going to put the brakes on. We're going to be done. We learned over and over and over again that it's not that easy. You can't. It's very, very difficult just to stop. That doesn't mean, however, that you should just take your foot off the brake and go whole hog as fast as you can. Again, I think you have to really be conscious of why you're making the decisions you make. And we realize that in addition to wanting, to needing to grow, to provide more opportunities to employees and to do more sustainability initiatives, sometimes growth is driven by, we've been in the fortunate position that people like our beer. They buy our beer. We have wholesalers that want our beer. We have retailers that want our beer. We have beer drinkers that want our beer. And the marketplace is becoming increasingly competitive.
Yeah.
So there are reasons to grow just to satisfy all three of those kind of constituencies. Wholesalers, retailers, and beer drinkers, right? And if they're not drinking your beer, they're going to go drink somebody else's beer. I'm going to be the last person to say I think our beer is good. Yeah. And I'm proud of the beer we make, but I would never be so bold to say that our beer is irreplaceable, right?
Right.
So if, someone's not cracking a bottle of our beer open, they're going to be cracking a bottle of somebody else's beer open. So if we want to provide all those kind of cool things that we want to do and create this really cool company, you got to strike while the iron's hot.
So
right?
where are you now? And where do you see that going in terms of, production volume?
Yeah. So, we are, so for the two previous years, so 2016, 2017, we were operating we were operating at capacity. We couldn't produce another drop of beer even if we wanted to. We were just tapped out in terms of our physical space wouldn't allow it. However, so we had to make, my brother and I had to make a really, really, really critical call. Do we just keep it that way? Stop?
Yeah.
Or we were kind of at one of those junctures where the next investment wasn't just another tank.
Yeah.
It's another building. It's another brew house. It's
Right.
You reach these stages of growth as a brewery or any company where you can kind of add marginally to your capacity, and then you hit these big kind of benchmark or these big kind of hurdles where you have to make huge investments to take it to the next level, and that's where we were. And obviously we decided that for all the reasons I just spoke about. We were going to invest in take it to the next level.
And so you just up and moved the brewery.
So we added a new building onto our original building.
Okay.
So we have a new facility, and then because as a brewer you can't just stop brewing for 6 months.
Right.
You have to keep your production going all while you're building a new building.
Right.
So we actually put in all brand new, a whole brand new brew house, cellar, packaging lines, lab, QA QC equipment. We basically made a whole second facility, installed that, and that will that'll allow us. We were operating at about a 12,000 barrel a year capacity for these last 2 years. In this brewery, it's a big jump for us.
Yeah.
We will tap out our new facility at somewhere around 45 or 50,000 barrels. So and we don't ever need to get there. With that, that's what we could grow into. This year our plan is to come close to doubling our production. But if we never sold another drop of beer more than that, just because the market didn't want it, we'd be fine. Again, we made our business planning decisions were very conservative.
Yeah.
We ran the numbers. We know our debt load, and we haven't and have no plans to sell any part of our company to any equity investors, private equity, or even family or anybody else. So other than some very, very, small amounts of the company that, some of our close family got in on the very, very beginning, we're very guarded with our ownership. We knew that we weren't setting unrealistic expectations, especially in this kind of crowded marketplace where we knew that if we just sold what we thought was a fairly conservative amount of beer more, we'd still be fine. And now we have capacity to grow. So if we do have, if we are in a fortunate enough position where people do keep wanting more and more of our beer, we don't have to tell them no.
Yeah.
And we can grow. But again, in the grand scheme of things, 45,000 barrels if we ever got there.
Yeah.
We're not talking hundreds of thousands of barrels. They're still pretty modest.
That's a lot
size.
of beer for the way that you package.
It
as
is.
Well. You have insisted on packaging in 500 milliliter bottles and glass in an era where a significant number of breweries have moved to aluminum cans and are or at least multi-pack kind of beer. The economic realities of the market out there are such that most consumers want to buy a little bit more volume. Why stick with single bottles of 500 milliliter beer in the marketplace now?
Yeah, we've been pretty stubborn that way.
Yeah.
And
how have you been able to get away with that?
Look, I don't have a great answer for that. I have some theories.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to investing in the communicating the value of your the values of your company, the why you're doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that our particular format, the single 500 milliliter bottle, it was a crazy idea at the beginning.
Sure.
I mean, I remember, approaching people that were already in the industry with our ideas, and like, you guys are going to go to market with a single 500 milliliter bottle and sell it for that amount of money? Like, good luck. You got to go heavy with half barrels or $9.99 six packs. That's the only way you're going to survive in this industry. But look what's happened. That obviously is not true.
Yeah.
And it's not just my brewery that has proven that that's not true.
Yeah.
I think that there is something to be said about standing out. Frankly, the more breweries, and trust me, I get the whole canning question almost every day. When you guys going to can? When you going to put your beer in cans?
Sure.
And there's nothing wrong with putting your beer in cans.
Right.
I drink canned beer all the time. This isn't a knock on canning per se, but when it comes to our particular brand image, the more when they're zigging, we're zagging. So it used to be you'd go into a cooler at a bottle shop and it was all bottles.
Right.
Now it's like you said, it's a large chunk of it is cans, and our bottle stood out amongst bottles just because of the nature of its design. But now in a sea of cans, it stands out even more. And I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I think that our bottle has also become iconic. We take an Orval bottle. If you drank an Orval out of a can, would you have the same experience? I don't think I wouldn't.
Probably not.
There's something to that particular bottle, the
Sure.
shape, the look, the feel. I think in my mind, what is great about beer is that it's an experience. It's a ritual. Sitting down, popping a top, pouring the bottle into a glass, with just the right amount of head, reading the story on the bottle. That to me can be a ritual. And I think in a lot of ways for people with our particular with our bottle, it has taken on that more iconic status. And I think if we short term, could we sell more beer if we canned it? Sure. But again, this goes back to why are you doing it? Are you doing it just so you can sell more?
Yeah.
No. I mean, now granted, if people stop buying our bottles, you might see us in cans, right?
Yeah.
There's a business reality to all this. It's not just altruistic.
Sure.
But
so far they haven't.
They haven't, right? And they continue to buy it in the bottle in that format, and that to us is a signal that they like it.
Well, you seem to also, relative to some of your contemporaries in New England, run this. You're using the same format packaging for your the beer that you push out into distribution into retail, as well as some of the beers that never really leave the brewery that you sell, direct to consumer only and more limited releases. Beers like Dinner, where beer geeks still line up for them and come and buy them directly from you. And so is there any kind of trickle down halo effect from the aura around some of those harder to get beers that may still add some value to the consumer packaging of the stuff that you do distribute? Is it ever part of your calculation, or is it just something that's happened?
No, it certainly has never been a part of our calculation. I think you brought up Dinner. I mean, the first time I brewed Dinner, I think we made. I didn't know if anybody would like it. We had a 7-barrel fermenter, 1 7-barrel fermenter where we were operating on a 15-barrel brew house, so we could do a half batch. That's how we would do our experimental beers. So Dinner, that's how Dinner started out, just an experimental beer. Like, let's just try this beer, try double dry hopping it, and I had done pilot batches of it, knew I liked it, but we just released it in a tasting room, not anticipating anybody showing up just to come try this, thinking that people would just be up in the tasting room, they'd see it on the shelf, and they'd try it.
Yeah.
But so we released it that first time, and people, it trickled through the tasting room, and it sold out, and so we're like, oh well that sold pretty well. There were no lines, there were no one.
Sure.
We didn't announce it. We weren't hyping it or doing anything, frankly. And so we said, well, next time we'll brew 15 barrels of it, and this time we'll tell people that we're gonna have it on sale at a certain time, so that they know when to show up and buy it. And I remember showing up to work the day that we released it. Actually, there was an employee that showed up way earlier than I did and reported, like, look, there's people lined up here.
What year was that?
Oh, geez, that would have been, I'm horrible with dates, but we might be coming up on 4 years, 3
Wow.
years, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to guess we're coming up on 4 years, but
Yeah.
I could be off by a year.
So what, 2015?
2014. We moved into our new brewery in Freeport in 2013. It was at least a year after that we
Okay.
came out with the first batch. So 2014,
Sure.
the spring of 14 at the earliest. Maybe the spring of 15.
Early times for people waiting in line
Yeah,
for IPA.
well, that's why we had no idea what
Yeah,
to
yeah.
expect. And so we showed up and we're like, holy shit. Like, we were underprepared. We didn't have like POS. We had one POS system, and we had this long line of people, and we got them all through and sold out all the beer. And so then the next time we're like, we'll made 30 barrels of it again, and then this time, like, we'll have like 2 or 3 POS systems. This time we'll nail it. More people showed up. I mean, we had people lined up down. We're on, if people are familiar with where we are, we're on kind of a Route 1.
Right.
We're Route 1. So it's a pretty busy road. People lined up down the road. So this is all a long-winded way of saying that we didn't try to create any of this intentionally.
Yeah.
This was all an organic kind of phenomenon that we did not anticipate. We certainly appreciate it when we're humbled by it.
Sure.
But struggled for many releases to try to accommodate people in a safe way and process people. I mean, people were camping out overnight. But you mentioned, like, this phenomenon was new to the craft beer. I mean, not new. I mean, there were other brewers who were experiencing this Dark Lord Day and stuff like that. But in large part, smaller breweries like mine, we were only producing a few thousand barrels at that point. We weren't experiencing this.
Right. For sour beers and for big barrel aged stouts, you kind of understood that. But for IPAs, didn't seem like the thing,
But again, certainly humbled and honored by the reception. But this was not an attempt to create manufacture buzz in order to sell more of our other brands. Now it's probably worked out that way. It gained us some notoriety, and that's great. That certainly wasn't the intent behind it at all.
Sure. And I don't know if most beer drinkers really understand all of the logistics involved in trying to make more of that beer. And there's that idea, well, it's an IPA, they can just make as much as they want. There aren't barrels involved, but sourcing the right amount of hops, the quality of hops that you're looking for from the place that you get them, those all pose challenges for you, especially if you haven't contracted for them. And you get pretty involved in your ingredient sourcing, especially when it comes to hops.
So especially early on with that beer in particular, some of the listeners here might be familiar with hop, how the hop contracting world works. Some might not be, but in our world, we forward contract for our hops. We forward contract now for 5 years.
Wow.
So we have to try to anticipate the quantity of and variety of the hops we're going to be putting into our beers in 2023 today. I mean, that's really a fool's errand in a lot of ways.
Why go to 5 years and not something like 3 and you're
to secure it.
Okay.
I mean, because if you don't, there's always the risk that if you don't secure it now and you wait 2 more years, right, they're going to be gone or the price is going to be a lot higher. You're playing in a futures market.
Sure.
You're trying to predict the future.
Right.
And so you're hedging and you're making your best guesses. But with that beer in particular, again, we didn't know it was going to be popular, and I frankly only planned on making 7 barrels of it, and so didn't predict 5 years from now. The 5 years we might want to make a lot more. And so at the very beginning, we couldn't literally could not make more than we were making of it. Obviously we've been able to do more planning now. We're 3 or 4 years beyond, kind of the launch of that beer, and we do make more of it.
Yeah.
We've gone from making 7 barrels at a time to 30 barrels at a time to 60 barrels at a time. We just, because of our new facility, we brewed 120 barrels of it at a time. We went from releasing it, once every 6 months to now we're releasing it, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 times this year, and 120 barrels each time. So we have increased the production of it considerably from the beginning. So I think sometimes there's this myth that we're intentionally trying to short supply people, or short supply the market in order to drive up buzz. In that is not true. However, I will say that we do sell it only out of the brewery, the bottles, and for me that's a quality reason.
Yeah.
Unlike draft beer, bottled beer going through wholesale, especially a double IPA, is extremely sensitive to abuse in the marketplace. Kept warm, I don't want that beer sitting on a retail shelf for a month. It'll ruin the beer. Frankly, it'll ruin the beer.
Yeah.
So by maintaining control of the distribution outside, just straight direct to consumer through our tap room, I'm given the most kind of the biggest peace of mind that I can possibly have that beer is going to go from our brewery the day that it's bottled into somebody's either mouth or into their refrigerator, and it's going to be consumed, fairly quickly. But also, there is something to be said about not making something that you really think is special, not making it ubiquitous.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's something to be said about that. So I think as brewers, and I think a lot of brewers would tell you the same thing, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't, right?
Sure.
We don't make enough of it, and then we hear, why aren't you making more of it? They're just trying to be stingy and trying to drive up demand by short supplying the market. You make it ubiquitous, then nobody wants it anymore. So, I would rather keep it special and a little bit more limited than have it become ubiquitous and nobody want it anymore.
For sure. Now, there's also a beer design question there, because certainly you do make beers that sit out there on shelves and have to deal with some of those as you said, questionable storage in retail.
But they're market realities. We have to, if you're going to distribute beer, you just have to work with those.
But you can also design recipes and and build those beers in a way that they are sturdier. And the flavors that you're trying to pull out of something like dinner are more fragile.
Absolutely.
That kind of hops character is certainly more fragile. Talk to me a little bit, about how that looks for something like, Peeper, Pale Ale, which goes out and does have to deal, out there in the retail channel versus something like dinner, and what some of those concerns are and how you design for that shelf stability.
Sure. So. You're absolutely right. I mean that as a brewer, and as anyone who's working in a process facility, there are ways that maybe not necessarily the recipe formulation in and of itself, but the brewing techniques, the techniques that you use in transferring your beer from brew house to cellar, from cellar to either filter or a centrifuge. We use a centrifuge. We don't filter any of our beers. The way that you package the beer, at each one of those process points, you have control over the quality of the beer. And not to get too technical, but really what is the catalyst for beer spoilage? But for beer spoilage is oxygen.
Yeah.
So at every step in the process, to the extent you can minimize oxygen uptake, the better shelf life, the better stability, the more sturdy your beer is going to be on a shelf in a bottle shop or in a bar or whatever. This ties into our early conversation on growth, and I didn't mention during that conversation that one of my kind of core principles is quality over quantity.
Yeah,
we better be investing at every step along the way in quality control and quality assurance, either tools, personnel, techniques, or whatever, before we're adding another tank.
Yeah.
It's frankly discouraging to go into some brewers. Some are not necessarily small, and you don't see microscopes. You don't see hemocytometers for cell counts. I mean, these are things that we owe it to our people that are spending their hard-earned money we owe it to them to produce top quality product. So for us, because we do make hop forward beers, and those tend to be beers that are a little bit more fragile, in terms of they will lose their aroma, oxidation will really can harm them. We invest heavily in QA, QC. That really, for us, that is the biggest safeguard, because once that beer leaves our dock, it's largely out of our hands.
Yeah.
It's hard. We don't have, foot patrol of police going into every bottle shop and looking at date codes.
Sure.
And so as much as our bottle tries to telegraph to people, we're very transparent. We put dates on all of our beers. We put best buy dates, so it's not just we put a born on date and drink within 90 days.
Yeah.
Very transparent about that, and it would expect somebody not to buy it if it's outside that. So it really comes down to what are your investment priorities, what are your growth strategies, and I would, and at least in my brewery, they have always been quality before quantity.
Let's pivot a little bit. I did mention it earlier, but you have been really active in working directly with hops growers, and we did a story about that in last year in Craft Beer Brewing Magazine. We had a fantastic conversation, and I wish I could have recorded it at that time because that was fascinating. But one of the things that you've been able to do, and part of that is your early entry into the industry in the late 2000s, getting in on that forefront of brewers working directly with hops growers to help move the agriculture in a way that serves what brewers really need. And, for a lot of the history of hops have been bought through brokers, and there'd been a third-party relationship, and so a few brewers, and certainly Vinny Slurzo is one of them, really kind of pioneered that, getting out there on the craft side and working directly with those hops growers, and to get what you need to make the beers that you want. How has that process evolved over time? And tell me a little bit about what you've been able to achieve by working directly with hops growers to give them feedback on how they develop new hops and push characteristics in their existing crops.
Yeah, I'll start out by saying I think that our and I use that in the sense of Maine Beer Company, and I think in the greater kind of American craft brewing world, our relationship with our suppliers, especially our hop suppliers, especially if you're a hop forward brewery like mine or like Vinny's, is one of the most important relationships that you have, that you should have at least. And so what I've prioritized is cultivating those relationships. So even though I live in the other Portland, that's on the opposite end of the country than where all of our hops are grown, we make it a priority to stay in constant communication with not only the farmers, but our hop brokers, and we go out there every single year and we examine the hops that we purchase. We select our hops, which a lot of I would say a decent number of breweries do.
Sure.
Less than you would think, but we certainly invest in that trip, the travel costs and everything associated with that. Again, I think that's...
And the larger hops brokers have certainly been bringing down the required volumes in order to even participate.
Right. So
in that kind of
So when
selection.
we first started, it wasn't even an option for us because we weren't using enough. They wouldn't.
Sure.
You don't have the option to go out there and select. You kind of got what you got. And you had to make do with it. But as you said, Jamie, nowadays. The amount of hops that you have to buy in order to allow them to come out and select has dropped dramatically. So more brewers should be taking advantage of that opportunity. But what that's done for us is, not only has it allowed us to go out there and actually physically inspect, to rub and smell and inspect the exact particular variety or lots of Simcoe and Citra and all the other hop varieties that we use, to make sure that they match what we want out of that hop. Because I think what was extremely eye-opening for me when I first went out there for selection was that the amount of variation within a variety from lot to lot, so let's take Simcoe for example, can be very shockingly broad.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're not going out there selecting and you're just relying on kind of the luck of the draw, you
Sure.
can get lots of Simcoe in your brewery that, I mean, you wouldn't know that they were both Simcoe if you put them side by side.
Yeah.
So we go out there and we select so that we can match we can get the exact
Right.
amount of kind of pininess or citrusiness or whatever it is we're looking for out of that Simcoe lot. We can get exactly that so that our beer stay consistent. Because
Right.
if we were brewing with different lots of Simcoe every year or every batch or whatever, the beers are going to taste different. So that's one important, just very, very practical and kind of quality-driven reason to go out there and to have a relationship with your broker. But even, I think, going a level beyond that is having a close relationship with a farmer.
Yeah.
And for me, it's fun. I mean, this is why you get into this business, is to go out in a hop field and talk with the hop breeder who is developing what could be the next Simcoe or developing what could be the next Citra or Mosaic or whatever, getting to pick their brain and go walk out in the fields and see these plants when there's only one or two of them in the ground, or there's only an acre of it in the ground, and have these conversations with the farmer. It's just incredibly enlightening and fun, and it also allows us as a brewery to stay on our game. Like I said, you don't know what the next big hop is going to be. What's going to be that next hop that just blows you off of your seat, right?
Right.
So by creating that relationship with the farmer, you can have some inside information on what are those experimental varieties coming down the pipe. And if you have a relationship with that farmer, maybe they give you a little bit to start to play around with before other brewers have a chance to play around with them. So again, there's another that creates that's a value in and of itself.
Right.
And also the farmer, they need feedback.
Yeah.
Right. They're extremely, the hop breeders, they're extremely talented at doing what they do, but very few, if any of them, are brewers.
Yeah.
So just because they can grow this beautiful looking hop, and while they can smell it out in the field and it smells good, on the palm of their hand, how's that going to translate when it's brewed with? So they rely on brewers like myself to give them feedbacks. And so, one of the things that we've done with one of the farmers that we work with, who happens to be kind of in charge of one of the larger breeding programs in the United States, is he sends us small samples of very rare kind of experimental hops, and we'll brew just single hop beers, meaning that we'll brew a beer that has a fairly kind of simple kind of malt bill, and really just try and put this one single hop in it so we can really focus and dial in on what this hop does or how it translates through the brewing process. And we'll take meticulous sensory notes, both that are provided by staff, so brewers and people that are kind of more trained sensory people, but we'll serve it in our tasting room, and we'll get feedback from customers, because that's, at the end of the day, that's really what matters, is to the beer drinkers like it. And we provide written feedback, we like comment cards. We take all those, synthesize that info, and give that back to the farmer, and he loves that. I mean, that's gold to him, because just because he can grow this hop, and maybe it's an abundant hop, it's good agronomically, that is, he can make money off it. If no brewers want to use it because no customers like the way that it presents in beer, then he's just wasted all his time.
Yeah.
So it's keeping those channels of communication is really valuable for us, the brewer, because it keeps it fun for us. It keeps us innovative. It's great for the farmer, because it gives kind of the market signals to him or her. Should I keep investing in growing and cultivating this variety? And it's just fun.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's been an interesting, I've noticed, actually, I guess it was a Great American Beer Festival last year, the first kind of bubbling up of mentioning hops estates, talking about the exact farm and the family, name on the farm of where those hops came from that are in this beer. And it seemed to me a kind of intriguing new way to not just talk about hop variety that's in that beer, but also talk about, who grew it and build some more of that connection. I don't know that that's ultimately the most important thing in the way that it is with, say, wine grapes and that terroir and the estate that they come from. But it is an interesting move to give those growers some of the credit for the ingredients that they're producing, especially those that are growing some really fantastic varieties. Is that something you all engage in or have thought about? Or
yeah, I mean, we certainly I think that there is a lot of value in the stories behind these hop farms.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of the things that separates a commodity from
Yeah,
what we all have
yeah.
created, and that is beer that's become non-commoditized. Is because there's stories behind not just the brewery.
Yeah.
There's stories behind the ingredients that we use, the barley growers and the hop growers.
Right.
They're especially the hop growers. A lot of these are just really small, multi-generational family farms. These are not, a lot of them are not large, industrial agriculture
You're absolutely
operations.
right. I made the trip out to Yakima last year and was just fascinated to see how many of these farms are still like fourth, fifth generation, same family, still family owned.
Yeah, I mean, they live in the house on the farm. I mean,
Right.
literally, their house
Right.
is you turn into the hop farm and you pass their house and their dog comes out to greet you, and you drive on back to the hop fields
Yeah.
and the processing facility.
And then some of the largest, brokers like YCH are also still controlled by those family farms.
Absolutely.
And some of the leadership of those companies are also themselves members of those families that have gone.
The leadership of YCH is they are the farm. He's the farmer.
And so it's fascinating to see, Mark Carpenter.
Yep.
Now I guess he's just stepping back from that leadership of YCH, but fifth generation. I mean, his family was the first to grow hops in Yakima Valley, and yet there's that kind of legacy and that kind of tight family control, and it. It's a beautiful story about craft and the way that these ingredients are also grown by people that really do care about the land.
It's what separates. It's one of the things
Sure.
that separates commoditized industrial light lager from craft beer.
Yeah.
Is that these stories matter.
Yeah. So what's on the horizon for Maine Beer Company? What's keeping you up at night, and what are the biggest exciting opportunities?
My two kids.
I think that goes for all of us. What's your fear right now? I mean, the industry as a whole is in an interesting position, and there are some external threats to the industry. There are internal business choices that are putting some breweries at great risk, and there's an increasing amount of competition because we're getting closer and closer to 7,000 breweries in the United States. There's increasing trends towards local, and more people are buying beer direct from breweries, but that also impacts some of the larger breweries who do great work but are also have a bigger distribution footprint. What do those challenges look like for you, and what makes you nervous, but what are you also most excited about?
Well, I mean, I think you touch on a lot of the things that make me nervous, and almost every other brewer in the country nervous, no matter how big you are, how fast you are growing today. There certainly are. I think there's a settling in of reality that the growth that we were experiencing over the last several years simply in any industry is not sustainable long term. We're settling into a more, I think, mature and sustainable growth pattern. I mean, you'll notice that we're not atrophying. The craft beer by volume is still growing. Now that being said, there are certainly a lot more challenges out there today for breweries large and small. And I do have, I have concerns that not everyone putting together their business plan or making decisions on when and how to invest are doing it off of realistic expectations for growth.
Yeah.
And that's not to say, you never want to rain on anybody's parade and say, look, you're just not going to grow that much.
Yeah.
Who am I to say, right?
Sure.
But what's even sadder is to see someone who made, kind of a poor business decision go under. I mean, I don't care if they're my competitor or not. I never want to see that happen to anybody because, I know how hard it is to start a business, and so
these are dreams and they're life savings.
These are life savings.
And, they have real personal impacts.
I don't know. I know of very few brewers who came into this business with a lot of money in their bank account.
Sure.
Most of them emptied it out to get into this business. So.
And their parents.
And their
and aunts and uncles.
exactly. So, for me, it's I just hope, I think growth is there. I think growth is I think it's going to continue to be there. I just hope that brewers are making business decisions that are consistent with that reality of the new growth pattern, and that it's not always going to be, 100% growth year over year. And it might be when you're 100 barrels, 1,000 barrels, but you start to get bigger and more mature, and other realities set in, and it's not always gonna be that way.
Yeah.
And that's also just the fear of the unknown, right? I think that if there's something that keeps me up at night, figuratively, not literally,
Sure.
but it's not knowing what in this crazy market that we're in, what is going to happen
Sure.
next. I mean, we've seen big brewers come in and gobble up some of our brothers and sisters. We've seen the massive proliferation of new smaller brewers open up. You've got cannabis coming online.
Yeah.
I think that discussion obviously has really ramped up in the last year or so, but that's going to be a reality. So it's the fear of the unknown, right? I'd rather know something and I can plan around that.
Right.
But not knowing what the future holds, that's what really makes you nervous, because you can do all the planning in the world, but if you don't have the information to do that planning, you could be caught with your pants down.
And it seems like the time frame in which we have to make these pivots is just getting more and more compacted.
Absolutely.
It used to be, okay, where am I going to be in 2 years? And now it's where we're going to be in 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
So the market can change just that fast.
Right. And so in order to, I touched on this earlier when I talked about kind of our growth plans. I mean, we're just incredibly conservative.
Yeah.
Like when we're trying to project, investments, capital, expenditures and stuff, we almost just create like worst case scenarios and act as if that is what the future is going to hold.
Yeah.
Anything on top of that then is gravy. Now you can't be too conservative because there's
Sure.
a cost to that as well. But
Right.
I think that that's kind of the mindset that we have in these uncertain times, and I hope that others are acting the same way. Because again, I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to see anybody go under or kind of put in jeopardy their life savings. So.
Yeah,
But-
maintaining the integrity of the beer that you make, I think,
Yes.
is the most important thing you can do.
So I mean, I think focus like a laser on not only quality, but why did you get into this business, right? Why are you making beer?
Yeah.
Tell your story. That is something that no one can take away from you. That that can't be bought by anybody. Authenticity is I think extremely important, and integrity is extremely important. You can't once you sacrifice those, you're never going to get them back. So focus on making great beer, but also focus on you got into this business for a reason, right? And just stay true to that. And beer drinkers they can sense that. Like I said, they can smell bullshit. So be real. But there's also a lot of things that excite me. I mean, seeing, in spite of, I think, the doom and gloom that in some ways is justified, but I think in more ways is not justified. All the stories we read about the beer industry in general, and overall beer is hemorrhaging, and craft beer growth is slowing. In spite of all that, in my state of Maine, I still see small breweries opening up in these small towns, and revitalizing. These are urban development stories. These are breweries that are going into old riverfront mills that were uninhabited and probably no business would have gone into but for a brewery opening up there. And then a brewery opens up, then a coffee shop opens up, and then a restaurant opens up. People start coming downtown when they didn't have a reason to before. And you see this story playing out over and over throughout the United States. And that's really exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of discussion about manufacturing leaving our communities, leaving our states, leaving our country, but look at what craft brewing has done for a lot of these communities. It's brought manufacturing back, and I challenge anybody to name.
Yeah.
I can't think of more than one. I can name on one hand the number of manufacturing industries in this country that are actually thriving, and ours is certainly one of those. So that to me is really, it gives me hope and optimism that we're creating something that isn't ephemeral, that isn't just going to disappear, and that's durable.
It is this kind of decentralization. That we went through this industrial revolution and manufacturing got consolidated and it became this tight thing. But brewing is blowing that back out, pushing that manufacturing back out of that local level. And the way, and that is in a lot of senses, mirroring the way that people's interest in farm to table is increasing. But it's a beautiful thing that beer can participate in that kind of cultural trend to being closer to the people that make those things.
Yeah, I think we're just our industry is one of the beneficiaries, I think, of a larger cultural shift of people who want to know and want to be able to look in the eye the people that are making the things that they're eating, drinking, wearing. I think people have just become fed up with the over commoditization of consumer products.
Yeah.
They want authenticity. They will pay for it.
Yeah.
They will pay a premium for it. And I don't think that's something that can't be taken away from us so long as we don't let it get taken away from us, right? I mean, I think that's a card that we have in our hand as small and independent brewers that a big brewer they can't buy authenticity. They can try to buy one of us, but they can't buy our authenticity. And so that's what gives me hope that, this is not, you get the bubble question all the time. Is it all going to go away? I'm like, are you going to go back to dial-up internet? Once you've experienced, once you've been to the promised land, you're not going backwards.
I try to tell people, once you've had good coffee, do you go back to 7-Eleven coffee again? I mean, there was this point where we spent 50 cents on a cup of coffee, but you know what? I'd rather pay a couple of bucks and get a good cup.
Yeah.
And
we have to deliver, right?
Yeah.
It's not. You never take it for granted. We have to make good beer and provide a compelling story, and to keep people coming back to us.
Yeah.
But so long as we're kind of good shepherds of all the hard work of brewers that came before us, I'm extremely optimistic about our future.
Well, that sounds like a great note to close on. Dan Kleban, thank you so much. Maine Beer Company, thanks for joining me on the podcast. If people want to learn more about Maine Beer Co., where can they find you all?
In Freeport, Maine, or if you don't happen to be within driving distance, you can always find us on the old World Wide Web. I think we're at mainbeercompany.com if I'm not mistaken. So, but I encourage you to visit us in Freeport.
Fantastic. I have been to the brewery, and it's a beautiful location and a beautiful state.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We love it.
Thanks so much, Dan.
Hey, thanks, Jamie. I appreciate it.
Cheers. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the podcast, and we'd love for you to subscribe to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine as well. If you subscribe to the magazine, then you can even check out through our digital archives on the app the article that Dan and I worked on about the brewer-grower feedback loop in last year's IPA issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode. Cheers.
Cheers.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.